Virginia Governor Ralph Northam defying calls for his resignation, which only escalated after that news conference. Let's bring in Jen Kearns, former spokeswoman for the California Republican Party and contributor for The Hill, Democratic strategist John Summers, former communications director for Harry Reid when he was Senate Majority Leader, and Republican strategist Joe Watkins, former White House aide to President George H.W. Bush. Joe, you were on here yesterday and you spoke unequivocally at the time. Did anything that Northam said yesterday change your mind? How would you describe that press conference?
No, it didn't change my mind at all. As a matter of fact, I was very sorry to see him not step aside. I thought that for the good of the Commonwealth of Virginia that he would step aside and let these wounds begin to heal. But instead, he denied that he was in the picture after having said initially that he was in the picture, and then he hearkened to another incident where he blackened his face to imitate Michael Jackson, one of our great entertainers of all time. Not the right thing to do. And again, just re-emphasizing the fact that he doesn't understand the degree to which this hurts our community. So I still stand with the NAACP and with others that are calling for him to step aside.
John, Northam did apologize, talked about wanting to earn forgiveness. Does that sound like a last grasp to keep his job?
He's got to get the hell out of there. I mean, that's what's got to happen at the end of the day. I mean, his apology, fine, but you know, first it wasn't me because I did it before and I learned it was a bad thing. That's not a great excuse. There is no excuse for this, and he's got to go. He's actually hurting the state, and he's hurting our country. He's, you know, again, opening wounds that are still very fresh, particularly at this moment in our history. But at the same time, you also have to think about who in the world is going to work with him? You're not going to have any Republicans, certainly, who are going to want to work with him, or any Democrats who are going to work with him for fear of being accused of trying to prop him up and help save him politically. So he's just got to go.
Jen, what did you make of Northam's admission what was effectively Michael Jackson blackface, while at the same time denying that racist yearbook photo? What was the point of that?
Well, I have to tell you, Philip, over 15 years of advising candidates and elected officials on their public image, I have to say that's the most absurd thing I've ever heard come out of the mouth of elected officials, and that's saying a lot. I mean, look, this is like a man saying, look, I didn't beat my wife last Saturday because I know it happened to be 2 weekends ago that Saturday. I mean, that's just the most absurd thing I've ever heard. Look, the problem now for Democrats and really the constituents of the state of Virginia might very well be that Northam refuses to vacate the office. And in that case, I've looked up the statutes of the state of Virginia, and there is possibly a provision for recall here. It's very rare, but it's been used. I've actually helped recall 3 elected officials in my lifetime, one being Gray Davis in the state of California, which got us Governor Schwarzenegger, and then 2 other top Democrat officials in the state of Colorado over gun control. It's not clear in the Virginia statutes whether a governor, a statewide officer, can be recalled, but it is possible, and this may actually come down to if Northam doesn't leave, the state legislature might actually have to begin impeachment proceedings against him, and that is permitted of a statewide elected official. And the reasons for that could be, you know, dereliction of duty, improper behavior, which I think all of that falls under this category.
And John, I want to bring you in to touch on what Jen was talking about. So Northam, he has lost support of just about everyone. Virginia's Attorney General, Senators Tim Kaine and Mark Warner, Congressman Bobby Scott, DNC Chair Tom Perez. They are all among those who have joined in on those calls for him to step down yesterday. So if pressuring him to resign does not work, what are the chances the next step will be state impeachment proceedings? Can you talk about that happening?
Yeah, I mean, Virginia is actually one of those states where it's very tough to recall a governor. It's one of 8 states that have some of the toughest laws in terms of making it a difficult thing for citizens to do, but it is something that's possible. It's one of the reasons I point to what I said earlier, his inability to actually do the job. No one's going to be willing to work with him on the legislative side. So it is going to hit that point where he may hit that incompetency trigger that's required by Virginia law. But I think at some point, regardless, he's going to be out of office, whether he realizes it or not. He is going to be leaving office, and I think it's going to be through a resignation, and I think it's going to be probably very soon.
All right, Joe, let's talk about someone who is not out of office. There are comparisons being drawn here between Democrats and their responses to Northam and Republicans' response to Congressman Steve King over his past racist remarks. King obviously stripped of his committee assignments, but still has the job. What's your take there on the comparisons between how these two parties are handling this?
Well, it's a very good comparison. I think Republicans should have been even more harsh in terms of their response to Steve King. I was pleased at least to see them strip him of his committee assignments. I thought at least that was a step in the right direction. But certainly if the Republican Party doesn't want to be branded as a party that's insensitive to the interests of people of color, it has to make a strong statement with people like Steve King and let them know that there's no place for them in the Republican Party, just as the calls are out right now for Governor Northam to step aside.
And, Joe, what about the president here?
Well, the president certainly has made comments about Northam. I would like to see him make a stronger comment. I'd like to see him say that Northam needs to step down because I think it's important for the people of the Commonwealth of Virginia, whether they're Democrat or Republican or black or white, but certainly for African Americans, it's important for the governor at this point to step aside. And I'd like to see the president say that unequivocally.
Well, something he didn't do at the time of Charlottesville, he got a lot of criticism when it comes to that. I mean, how does he reckon those two different reactions here?
Well, I was clearly one of the people that criticized the president when Charlottesville happened in 2017. I thought that his response was too little, too late. That and then certainly when he said that there were good people on both sides, I thought that was a terrible statement. It certainly did a lot to anger our community. That is the African Americans. I'm an African American, and it angered African Americans around the country. And I thought that it was a moment when he could have been a healer, that he could have come out and made a strong statement against white nationalists and against KKKers and against racists. I thought it was an opportunity missed on his part, and I said so publicly on national media.
And Jen, should Republicans call out the president more?
Well, look, I think the president's been actually treated somewhat unfairly in regards to Charlottesville. You know, President Trump came out and said that racism is, quote unquote, evil. He said that the events in Charlottesville were horrendous. Those were exact quotes of his. And there was one man just 2 days after Charlottesville that said this: "We condemn in the strongest possible terms this egregious display of hatred, bigotry, and violence. It has no place in America. As I have said many times before, no matter the color of our skin, racism is evil, and those that cause violence in its name are criminals and thugs, including the KKK, neo-Nazis, white supremacists, and other hate groups that are repugnant to everything we stand for as Americans." That is not too little. It may have been a little too late, but that is a pretty strong statement from President Trump. So let's talk about Northam as Northam and hold him accountable for what he did. Let's separate President Trump from that.
All right, Jen, thank you so much for that. All right, last word, John, real quick.
Yeah, that was a nice try. But again, when you say there are good people on both sides, that's just absolutely wrong. The rhetoric that this president has used only inflames the racial tensions that we're seeing in our country. You're right. That's a separate issue. But he is a flawed messenger in this case, and he's better just to stay out. And speaking of getting out, it's time for Northam to go, and let's let the lieutenant governor step up.
All right, John, Jen, Joe, thank you so much for joining us this morning.